boss rush RPGs have taken over the gaming industry in the last decade. Whether it's open world games like Elden Ring and Sekiro, or more traditional boss rush experiences like Hollow Knight and Cuphead, boss fights are an integral part of many of these franchises. But today, I'm not here to talk about any of them. Instead, I'm going to talk about this, probably the most iconic and revolutionary game of the entire boss rush genre. It's a captivating and brilliant artistic achievement that's both thought-provoking and emotionally moving, while also delivering incredible boss fights, cutscenes, and set pieces. With amazing graphics and a physics engine way ahead of its time, it paved the way for future franchises like Dark Souls to flourish, and even inspired some of the most popular game and movie directors in the world. Today, I'd like to take you through the story of Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus was originally released as a PlayStation 2 exclusive in 2005. It was created by Team Ico, a small Japanese studio under the branch of Sony Interactive Entertainment. Their lead game director, Fumito Ueda, was the brain behind the operation, and was known for his incredible creative philosophy and artistic ability, having studied visual arts at the University of Osaka. The studio's first game, Ico, was released in 2001, and was a minimalistic 3D platformer. The game itself was centered around Ico, a young boy who was born with horns and was being locked away by his village in an abandoned fortress to be sacrificed. During his explorations of the castle, Ico meets a girl named Yorda, the daughter of an evil queen who seeks to use Yorda's body to prolong her own life. Learning this, Ico decides to escape the castle alongside Yorda, and the gameplay follows the two as you escort Yorda through various puzzles and obstacles along the way, always holding onto her hand. While escort missions are typically the bane of every gamer's existence, Ico is the exception to the rule. Since Yorda speaks a different language, you're forced to progress through the game with only physical communication as a tool. This non-verbal dynamic is brilliant game design. There's no hand-holding or obvious dialogue clues to help you progress through the game. Ico instead lets you put the pieces together by yourself, which is equally challenging and rewarding. Ico's story and gameplay were very simple and effective, but its true beauty was in its design. Both the art style and atmosphere of Ico were beautifully crafted, especially for a game released over 20 years ago. The game was minimalistic in nature. The desaturated color grade of the castle is complemented beautifully by set pieces of waterfalls and lush greenery, which makes the world of Ico feel alive. The isolated castle setting, the lack of music, and the ambient soundscapes of water flowing or seagulls calling provides a moody, dreamlike atmosphere that further enhances the experience. The absence of sound makes every piece of audio that much more effective and impactful, especially when the soundtrack does kick in. Using silence as a tool to tell a story is an idea that's been lost to time in the gaming industry, and it's a breath of fresh air in Ico. Ico truly is a masterpiece, and showcased the creative brilliance and vision of Fumito Ueda right from the start. He even painted the box art for the game himself. I mean, just look how good it looks. I'm not going to dive into the finer details of Ico in this video, but I'll leave a few videos down in the description that I recommend you watch to fully understand why this game is so beloved. While Ico was critically acclaimed and very well received in Japan, such was not the case in North America. The less is more strategy employed by Fumito Ueda that made Ico so enticing was difficult to capture in advertisements. Couple that with the worst box art ever made to go along with the North American release, and Ico bombed financially. I mean, seriously though, who at Sony thought it was a good idea to replace this masterpiece with that?
I'm kind of retarded.
Regardless, Fumito Ueda had shifted his focus to making a game more appealing to all audiences. And having been inspired by his love of monster movies, Shadow of the Colossus was born. Shadow of the Colossus was released in October of 2005, at the tail end of the PS2's lifecycle. And this time, the box art for the game was tailored specifically to attract people's attention. showcasing one of these massive colossi right on the front cover. And it worked. While not a direct sequel to Ico, Shadow of the Colossus seems to take place in the same world, with many themes like Forbidden Lands and Souls of the Dead remaining ever present. Shadow of the Colossus took the art style and atmosphere that worked so well in Ico, and they scaled it up by a factor of 100, while still keeping a simple and emotionally immersive storyline present throughout. Add in a revolutionary physics engine and some dope-ass colossi, and you have yourselves one of the best video games ever made. Almost everything that makes Shadow of the Colossus so special is present in its opening cinematic. You follow a bird's perspective across a mountainous landscape. The bird then passes Wander, the main character of the story, riding along the edge of the cliff on his trusty steed Agro. You're then taken through various lush biomes with an expanding color palette, all while serene orchestral music plays in the background. You arrive at what looks to be an abandoned fortress that towers above you, with a small crack just big enough for you to fit in between. And as the music crescendos to its climax, you're greeted to the beautiful and bleak landscape of the Forbidden Lands, revealing the grand scale of the journey you're about to embark on. And then, the camera pans away into the title card. This opening sequence perfectly encapsulates the atmosphere and art style of the entire game. The desolate beauty of a once luscious but now abandoned land, with a beautiful soundtrack to carry you through the opening minutes. It gives you a glimpse into the world you're about to explore, and even foreshadows some key events in the story. The game begins with Wander traversing down the temple and into the main courtyard, passing by various statues of larger-than-life figures. Wander then places a young girl named Mono onto the temple's shrine. We're then given some short exposition about the Forbidden Lands and its ability to bring back the souls of the dead. We meet Dorman, an unknown figure that has this ability, and he agrees to bring Mono back to life on one condition. We take down the 16 colossi who roam the lands. This cutscene gives us a glimpse into Fumito Ueda's style of storytelling. He provides you with so few details, but each is important in understanding the plot and the intentions of each character. For example, Mono's relationship to Wander is never explained, whether she's his lover, his sister, or his mother, since it doesn't really matter. All we know is that Wander will do anything to bring her back, no matter the cost. This allows the player to empathize with Wander right away, as they can project their own real-world relationships onto the characters. So instead of being some random girl we need to save, Mono represents an important person in our lives that we would do anything for. Once you finish your chat with Dorman, you hop on your horse and begin your quest to defeat all the colossi. After some quick horseback riding and a climbing tutorial that introduces you to the main mechanics of the game, which is the stamina bar and the light sword, you're met with this cutscene, introducing the very first Colossus. Valis. This is the first time that you get to see the pure size and scale of the beasts that you need to defeat, and oh boy is it effective. I remember 9-year-old me sitting and watching this for the first time, losing my mind. And as you approach the beast, he turns to face you. The music swells, and the fight is on. Various on-screen prompts guide you throughout the fight to help defeat Valis, like using your sword to find his weak points, and climbing the fur and platforms on his back to get to his vital spots. You quickly learn the importance of stamina management. Valis will shake violently in an attempt to get you off. Each time he does, Wander will stagger and won't be able to move, so timing your movements in accordance with these shakes is vital. Once you reach the mark spot on the top of his head, you thrust your blade into his skull until he can take no more, and the first of the 16 Colossi is defeated. This fight is simple and fairly easy to complete, but it's executed very well and hooks the player into the main gameplay loop right away. The End of the Battle soundtrack plays as Valis falls, but instead of an upbeat and cheery chorus that gets you pumped, it's a hauntingly beautiful score that fills you with a sense of clarity and emptiness. As you reflect on the decisions you just made, tentacles fly out from the body of Valis and enter your body, knocking you unconscious. The End of the Battle score is a work of art, and is, in my opinion, the best song on one of the greatest soundtracks ever created. It's played after every battle with the Colossi, and its impact and meaning only grows with each battle. The song provides so much depth to the story, as well as our own feelings towards both the characters and the Colossi themselves. And while this game is memorable in so many different ways, it's the music that really sticks with you. You wake up once again in the temple and watch as the idol representing Valis crumbles to pieces. You're then sent off to fight the next Colossi, and this is where you're really able to explore and take in the sheer scale of the map. The setting of the game is notorious for its bloom effect, with bright and streaky lighting giving it an otherworldly feel, almost as if it's a dream. The Forbidden Lands is not a place of man, or rather, a place where men shouldn't dwell, and this is captured beautifully by the desolate scenery of this barren wasteland. You'll pass by deserted temples and abandoned cities, with broken and overgrown buildings filling what little there is left of this land. Like in Eco, no music is present during these treks to the Colossi. This silence embodies the idea that you're not supposed to be here. The only noises made are the beating of Agro's hooves and the occasional bird cry. As you descend down the cliffs and under the bridge's archway, you come face to face with the second Colossus, a four-legged beast who crashes through the doorway of his seaside cave. Quadratus. Quadratus makes one thing clear right away, that not all the Colossi are the same two-legged beast. In fact, they come in a variety of different forms and each have their own distinct arenas and environments, offering a unique challenge to the player. Shadow of the Colossus does a great job at hinting at important features in the arena or on the Colossus themselves that guide you to beat them. For Quadratus, you're immediately alerted to the glowing at the bottom of his feet, and if you shoot at it with your bow, he'll stagger and let you climb up his leg. After stabbing his head a few times, the glowing mark fades, indicating to the player that Colossi may have multiple vital points to look out for. The second vital point is found at Quadratus' tail. Another couple strong stabs to his rear and you take down the beast. Quadratus feels like a second tutorial boss that introduces you to the importance of using your environment to your advantage. And while it isn't the most memorable boss, it's a step up in complexity. And honestly, it's just really cool seeing a huge bull crash through a wall for the first time. The third Colossus sees you travel to a secluded lake deep in the mountains, with what seems to be an abandoned stage right at the center. After climbing up, you're met by the Guardian of the Lake, and what is arguably the best intro cutscene in the entire game. Gaius is regarded as one of the best Colossus in the entire game, and it's easy to see why. The opening cutscene sets up the fight so well. Gaius rises to his feet and raises his sword, accepting your challenge as he towers leagues above you. The music swings into action as he approaches you and heaves down his stone sword. The setting is also stunning, atop a slanted arena that overlooks the entire map. You can even see the bridge and the temple in the background. The fight itself is super entertaining. You pace around, dodging his attacks, and manage to climb onto his sword, but can't progress because of the armor blocking your way up. You then notice a large stone slab at the center of the arena, and if you bait Gaius into smacking it, his armor will shatter, providing a pathway to his head. The climb up is the most challenging you've faced thus far, trying to balance on his swaying sword and maneuvering up his slim body. Once you make it to the top and stab him in the head, a second sigil will appear on his chest, and you climb down his front to deliver the killing blow to this fearsome warrior. The camera pans out in full view of the arena as Gaius crumbles to his knees, his sword falling alongside him for the last time. This is the fight that really hooks you and makes you fall in love with Shadow of the Colossus. A duel against a great warrior on top of an enormous arena with a beautiful backdrop and a thrilling score to tie it all together. Truly a 10 out of 10 fight. And it's just the first taste of what makes Shadow of the Colossus so great. The fourth Colossus takes you through a vast green field, with what appear to be rows of tunnels or tombs. You come face to face with the creature, as it gets up from its long slumber to face you head on. Meet the Guardian of the Graves, Phaedra. Phaedra's appearance is visually striking and is a big contrast to the colossi that came before it. Its bony and jagged appearance is due to it being mostly made of rock, with sharp legs and two long rocks dangling from its face. Phaedra's design is very similar to that of a horse, and beating him requires you to make use of his arena. Instead of a one-on-one duel like with Gaius, fighting Phaedra is more akin to a game of cat and mouse. By using the graves you passed by earlier, you can lure the creature to peer down into the tomb as you run inside of it. Once he does, you can pop out the other side and climb onto its back. Another few stabs to his neck and head are all it takes to bring him down. The Phaedra fight is a fun blend of stealth and trickery that makes great use of the environment. It's also one of the most emotionally taxing fights in the game, since looks-wise, it's the closest thing to a real animal. Phaedra just seems like an inquisitive creature who's just curious about what you're up to, and you've decided to wake him up from his nap and murder them. This is the first boss that people really stop to think, hey, why am I killing these creatures? And that's an important emotion that Fumito Ueda was trying to implement in the game, understanding the brutality of committing actions such as these. Colossus 5 is another change of pace, as you arrive to an abandoned city that's floating on a misty lake. You leave Agro behind as you dive into the water and climb up the tower, only to be met with an unexpected cutscene. A bird-like creature soaring in the skies flies down to perch on his tower. The Warden of the Lake, Avion. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but the setting and scenery for this fight is spectacular. Not only are you facing a Colossus that can fly, but you're surrounded by a vast lake that's shrouded in fog. The atmosphere of the arena is amazing and captures the essence of being completely out of your depth. Even during the initial phase of the fight, Avion will stay peacefully perched at the top of his tower, surveying you until you provoke it with an arrow, and he'll glide down towards you and swoop you up in the air. The feeling of terror and excitement you get as you soar into the air on the back of this creature is unmatched. You see Wander holding on for dear life as Avion turns and flaps his wings, trying to shake you off. This incredible experience is one that very few games have ever been able to emulate to this day. Just look at the graphical difference between this and God of War, and they came out at the same time. Not to mention the complex physics system, camera angles, and handcrafted animations to go along with it. And speaking of the game physics, this fight showcases the brilliance of Team Ico's engine to the fullest extent. Shadow of the Colossus was one of the first games to ever implement inverse kinematics into their system, while most other games at the time were limited to just forward kinematic. Forward kinematics acts like a chain system. When the first joint in an arm or leg moves, the rest of the limb past that point will follow, and each part of the chain can only affect what comes after it. For inverse kinematics, the movements of the last joint impact the position of each other joint in the limb, which allows for smoother and more lifelike movement. It's like when you pull your arm forwards or backwards to grab something. Your elbow will automatically adjust its position based on where your hand is going. If you don't quite understand the difference, don't worry. Just know that inverse kinematics is extremely hard to do well and costs a lot of time and money to pull off. Literally nobody was pulling it off in the 2000s, let alone to do it at the incredible scale of a Colossus. The smooth flapping of Avion's wings feels so realistic, and Wander's reactions to those movements feel equally as accurate, which adds a whole new layer of immersion into the game. Bringing down this flying phenom is one of the most thrilling moments. Rain swirling in the skies, and wind dragging you around as you climb onto each of his wings and stab at his vital points. Finally, you make the long trek to the end of his tail and deliver the final blow, bringing down this magnificent creature once and for all. Avion is yet another fantastic fight. It's both memorable and infinitely replayable, and stands as a testament to the quality of the game. The journey to the 6th Colossus takes you through a dense forest, a barren ravine, and a vast desert that leads you to an underground ruined temple. The contrast between these areas flows really well and helps the player understand both the diverse nature and the vast emptiness of the Forbidden Lands. Once you enter the temple and climb to the bottom, a massive gate opens behind you, revealing a towering beast, ready and looking for a fight. Barba. This fight shows the player just how outmatched they are against the Colossus, as there's no easy way to climb onto Barba. The best you can do is run away and avoid getting stomped on while he crashes through the walls chasing after you. The trick to this fight, however, is in its name. Once you reach the end of the temple, you're able to hide under a small set of pillars. From there, you can lure Barba down to your level, and once he crouches to get a look at you, you can grab a handful of that sexy beard. Making the most notable feature of the Colossus a part of the method to beating him is great game design, since your attention is already centered on it. As you mount the bearded beast, revived power starts to play, filling you with excitement and determination. From there, a couple of well-timed stabs to both vital points is all you need to get the job done. Barba is a cool Colossus with a great arena and a memorable design, but its finicky mechanics and frustrating gameplay take away a bit from the enjoyment of the fight. Since his beard is only attached to his face, climbing it is extremely wonky and can be a real pain to have to retry if you fall off. But other than those minor complaints, Barba is a great addition to the cast that amplifies the experience of the game. Colossus number 7 puts you back in unknown waters, literally, as you travel to another abandoned lake, this time with a tall spire in the middle. Once you reach the top, you're forced to jump in, committing to the consequences you're about to endure. And from the waters below, a creature rises. The deep sea dweller known as Hydrus. If you hate the ocean or deep sea creatures, this Colossus is pure nightmare fuel. An electrified leviathan that lurks below you as you just float there helplessly. Yet another occasion where you're dependent on your environment. Fortunately, Hydrus is a little too curious about who you are and comes up to greet you. If you manage to grab on, you're given a short time to make your way up to his head. However, there are 3 electrified fins that block your path up the creature, so you need to shut them off by stabbing the weak points that lie beside them. After a few rounds of serpent riding and stabbing, you get to his head and finish him off, and Hydrus sinks to the bottom of the lake for good. Hydrus is another solid addition to the Colossi cast, offering one of the few water fights in the game. And while the fight itself is a bit one-dimensional, I think the setting, the arena itself, and the feeling of slaying such a massive sea creature makes up for it. Deep in the heart of the mountain lies your 8th opponent, in a temple at the base of a waterfall. Once you arrive inside, you peer down below to see a shining, lizard-like creature at the base of the Colosseum. His name is Kuromori. Kuromori changes things up on the player in a lot of unique ways. For starters, he's small and fast, unlike the other Colossi who are slower and tower far above you. Not only is his appearance different, but the arena you face him in is extremely cramped, and you're forced to rely on verticality to try and stay safe. Unfortunately, Kuromori doesn't care about your safety, and will climb up the walls and spit poison at you if you're not careful. There's no real way to attack the beast head-on. The trick, once again, lies in using the arena to your advantage. By luring him up the side of the tower, you notice his shining legs that let him stick to the walls. Shooting at them will temporarily knock the beast down and give you access to his front, where both of his vital points lie. Figuring out Kuromori's weakness to beat him takes time and might result in a few deaths, but overall, he's a really enjoyable boss that rewards you for patience and precision, making him one of the best the game has to offer. Reaching the halfway point of the game gives you a brief glimpse of Mono, alive and well, rising to her feet, but it's quickly revealed to be a dream. From there, we can really begin to see the toll that Wander is taking from defeating these Colossi. Each time you defeat a Colossi and teleport back to the temple, a shadowy figure stands over Wander before he regains consciousness, seemingly representing the souls of the Colossi that he now possesses. There's also an equal number of doves that begin to circle around Mono. The number of figures builds after each victory, and Wander begins to look more and more sickly. His skin turns paler, his eyes more blank, and a close-up of his hand shows off how infected his body is starting to become. But yet again, no details of the story are given, which both intrigues you and makes you start to question your actions. The long stretches in between each Colossi give you time to really reflect on what you're doing. You've intruded on a land you have no stake or claim to, and are roaming around, slaying these majestic beasts for purely selfish reasons. And up to this point, it doesn't seem to be working, but you've committed too many sins to back out now, so you're forced to carry on and see it through. The reason the story of the game works so well is because it tells itself. The premise is very simple, but it leaves the details up to the player's interpretation, which lets them form their own feelings and ideas about the game, especially as the world around you continues to grow. The 9th Colossus takes you into the heart of a storm. Deep in his cave, you find the giant monster waiting, the Watcher of the Lost Lake. Bassaron. Bassaron feels like a more complex version of Quadratus, and gives you your first real taste of horse combat. While you were optionally able to use aggro in previous fights, she becomes a necessity to use against Bassaron, specifically against his projectile attacks, which launch explosive beams at the player so fast that you're unable to dodge unless you're riding on aggro. Bassaron feels like an ancient reptile, a mix between a dinosaur and a turtle, especially considering the enormous shell it boasts on its back. Beating him requires you to use the geysers that you passed by earlier, and by leading him over top of one as it explodes, the Colossus will lift his legs into the air, allowing you to shoot the heel of his foot. Once he topples over, you're able to climb on his shell up to his head and take him out with a few swings. While most of the bosses in this game are top tier, Bassaron is one of the very few lowlights of the game. His scale and threatening presence definitely shine through, but the fight itself is pretty tedious and not as fulfilling as the rest. Getting showered with bullets as you wait 20 minutes for him to walk over a geyser isn't all that fun. And once you do get on his back, he only has one weak spot, so the fight's basically over. Making use of aggro during the fight was a great idea, but it just wasn't pulled off as well as it could have been. Fortunately, the 10th Colossus makes up for Bassaron's mistakes and then some. Echoing shades of Dune, you venture deep into a cave to an arena filled with sand. The ground begins to rumble beneath you until a creature leaps out of the sand and faces you. Meet the sand snake, Dirge. While using aggro against Bassaron makes the fight a lot easier, it's not technically required to beat it. In this fight, however, your only hope of beating Dirge is on horseback. Trying to grab onto the snake normally will just result in you drowning in the sand and dying. So you're forced to lead Dirge around the arena until his eyes emerge from the sand. Seeing his eyes pop out at you for the first time is both terrifying and exhilarating, and if you manage to shoot an arrow at him, Dirge will crash into the wall and give you time to find his weak spots. This fight is so cool, for the simple fact that you have to put yourself in danger in order to damage the Colossus. Most other bosses you can outsmart or trick into grabbing a hold of, but for Dirge, you have to commit to being chased around to get an opportunity to strike back. Some people don't like this boss because aggro is really hard to control, which is true, but that's just another intentional feature of the game to make it feel more realistic. Aggro is an important character in the game, not just a tool you use to traverse from point A to point B. She's also a living creature with a conscience, which means she won't always respond perfectly to every request or action you input into the game. And while yes, that can be frustrating at times, especially during boss fights, it makes you appreciate aggro more when she does pull through for you, deepening the bond you have with her even more. The same thing goes for Wander. Since he's not really a warrior, you can clearly see him stumbling around awkwardly trying to climb Colossi, and the way he holds the ancient sword is more akin to a novice than an expert swordsman. It fits his character, since he's just a young man who's determined to bring back his girl, even though he might not have the skills to do so. But overall, Dirge is a super unique fight that has yet another amazing setting, and even though it can be a little bit challenging, it's well worth the satisfaction once you finally defeat the Sand Snake. Sadly, Dirge is succeeded by the second lowlight of the Colossi, found in an altar that overlooks a dried up lake. He's the Guardian of the Flames. Celosia. Celosia is a small little guy. And when I say small, I mean like elephant size, so still huge. And while the idea behind this fight is interesting, it's pretty poorly executed and doesn't really mesh well with the game's mechanics. Since Celosia is smaller than any other Colossi, he's extremely fast, so it's very difficult to dodge their attacks head on. If you do get hit by one of them, Wander just sits on the floor taking a nap for 5 hours. And by the time you start to get back up, Celosia slams into you again. It's very easy to get stun locked and die in this fight, and having to start over is a chore. The trick to this fight is also fairly unclear. You're supposed to jump on top of these flame altars and let Celosia slam into them until a torch drops. From there, you pick up the torch and scare the bull off the edge, breaking her armor in the process. It's a little weird that the Colossus who's meant to guard the flames is also scared of it, but I guess it's just a bit of fun irony. Trying to stab at Celosia's back is even harder, since each shake rattles their whole body, and Wander can't ever seem to get his footing. Shadow of the Colossus' gameplay is a bit slower paced and sluggish compared to games like Dark Souls, so putting a boss this quick and small doesn't work as well as it could have. Overall, the fight itself is cool in theory, but it just didn't pan out in practice. Luckily, the quality of the fights after this point are top-notch. And that begins with the 12th Colossus, who's located in a foggy lake at the edge of a waterfall. Upon reaching a platform in the middle of the arena, another fantastic cutscene cues you into the fight. Pelagia has one of the best designs of any of the Colossi. He has no face or eyes. They're replaced by 2 long tusks that extend from his body and shining blue teeth on the top of his head. He seems to be a blend of multiple sea creatures and has a very menacing presence, being able to fire thunderous projectiles at you in the water. Pelagia's fight is also very unique. There's a clear path up his back to get to the top of his head, but there's no vital spot there. Just the row of teeth I mentioned previously. The trick is to smack his teeth and guide him to one of the platforms. Giving you control of the Colossus is a really fun mix-up from what you're used to, since this time, the player is calling the shots and not the Colossus. For me personally, imagining someone banging a sword on my teeth makes me cringe inside, but that doesn't take away from how awesome this fight is. Once you get on top of the platform, you can bait Pelagia to raise their front legs, revealing their only vital spot right on their stomach. Defeating this towering beast is a really rewarding experience, especially seeing him fall backwards into the water after delivering the final blow. Once Pelagia is down, a cutscene plays following a group of people riding towards the Forbidden Lands, with one wearing the same mask as we saw in the intro cutscene. They seem to be chasing after Wander, trying to stop him from completing his quest, but their motives for doing so remain a mystery. Colossus number 13 is another iconic battle that sees you return to the desert once again. Once you stumble upon some old ruins, rumbling from beneath the earth begins, and the creature shoots out of the ground and up into the air. The Surveyor of the Skies, Phalanx, welcomes you into battle. Phalanx mixes the best parts of both Avion and Dirge together, with exciting horse combat and a high-flying battleground, all taking place in a huge sand-filled landscape. The fight itself has 2 equally enjoyable phases, one on the ground and one in the skies. When first looking at the beast, your eyes are immediately drawn to the large air sacs underneath him that keeps him afloat. Once you shoot them down, Phalanx drops to the floor and lowers his wings, giving you an opportunity to catch up on aggro and make the leap onto the creature at full speed. From there, you have to make your way to its 3 vital spots under its flaps, all while Phalanx twists around in the sky trying to throw you off. Killing Phalanx in one go is next to impossible, since he'll close up his flaps and dive back underground. But that just means you get to do the fight all over again, which I'm more than happy about. There's also a bit of hidden lore surrounding Phalanx. People believe that the rings you see around the arena and underground are a force field that keeps him confined to the desert, since he could very well just fly off. This fight is Shadow of the Colossus at its best and most groundbreaking. Again, this shit was made on a PS2, which is basically a toaster compared to any new hardware we have today. And it was still pulled off so well. Phalanx is a fantastic spectacle and even more of a treat to fight. The 14th Colossus is the furthest from the temple, and is known primarily for its magnificent environment and battle arena. After passing through a majority of the map, you arrive at the remnants of a destroyed city, its walls and buildings overgrown with moss and grass. The city itself has a very peaceful atmosphere. It really feels like this was a place where humanity once thrived. Team Ico's philosophy for the creative process was the idea of design by subtraction, where they would build out a world and then remove elements that were not vital to the story or the messages they were trying to convey. This is why most of the Forbidden Lands is essentially barren. Other than the Colossi and a few lizards, they were made to appear desolate so as not to detract the player from its reality. By doing so, it makes the few set pieces and landscapes in the game that much more effective, and it works especially well here. As you make your way towards the city's temple, you come face to face with its guardian, the armored lion, Zenobia. This fight makes total use of its pretty arena, as the entire city acts like a level. Rather than a duel or a puzzle, facing Zenobia plays like a platformer, where you make your way up various pillars and bait the beast into knocking them down. The more pillars you knock down, the more the level opens up, until you're able to reach the center of the city. Knocking down the main chamber of the city will break Zenobia's armor, and with a few quick stabs in the back, the lion crumbles alongside the city he defends. Fighting Zenobia can be a bit tedious, which definitely affects its replayability, but I think the idea of the level meshes really well with the mechanics you learn throughout the game, and the setting is beautiful enough to come back all on its own. So overall,
Nice.
the penultimate Colossus takes you through the fortress of yet another lost city, although this one seems to be on a much grander scale, with castle towers and walls surrounding it. You climb up a giant staircase that leads to a massive courtyard overlooking a large valley. Once you reach the end of it, you're met with the sentry of the lost city, who likes to make an entrance. Argus shares a lot of similarities with the first Colossus, but by no means is he as easy. For starters, he's almost double the size of Valis, and wields a dagger instead of a club. There's also no way of getting onto Argus from the ground, so you're forced to use the stadium as a path to victory. By baiting Argus over to the platform on either side of the arena, he'll attempt to stomp on you, and will raise the platform up to let you climb to the next level. From there, baiting him to attack the pillars will break open a hole in the ceiling, giving you access to the top floor and the overhanging bridges above the giant. After one more big swing from Argus to destroy the bridge, you're able to make your way onto his head and stab at his vital spot to finish him off. Except, he doesn't quite die, because there's actually a secret second vital spot somewhere else on his body. Looking around on his back will reveal a small weak point on the side of his right arm, and stabbing it causes him to drop his dagger, enraging him in the process. In a cool twist, the last vital spot is actually on his palm, and if you manage to bait out a slam, you can grab the inside of his hand and a quick stab will put him down. Argus's fight is a little divisive amongst the community. A lot of people hate how tedious the fight gets and how difficult it is to figure out on a first playthrough. Personally, I love Argus. The fight feels so grand because of the stadium setting, and his entrance into the arena is one of the best in the game. I also like that the puzzle is a bit harder to solve than the rest of the Colossi, which makes it more rewarding when you do figure it out. The fight does take a long time, but I'm okay with that, considering how little time is left in the game at this point. Visually, Argus is a little bland, but the fight and the city you face him in is one of my favorite settings in the whole game, and it sets the stage for the last fight really well. As per usual, you're teleported back to the temple, with a whole host of shadowy figures now surrounding you. Dorman urges you on, saying only one more foe stands in your way, but time is short. The ride to the last Colossus takes you south, all the way to the edge of the world. You come across a mystical gate pointing light towards a center platform. By raising the ancient sword to the light and aiming it at the center, the door will open to your final challenge. Just a few staircases and a bridge to go, and the last Colossi awaits. As the bridge collapses around you, your best friend, who helped you through every challenge you faced thus far, sacrifices herself with one last heave to get you to safety. Wander turns around to grab Aggro, but it's too late, and she falls into the waters below. This scene is always emotional on each playthrough, especially the first time. Throughout the game, you've grown dependent on Aggro, riding through the Forbidden Lands and taking on Colossi together. Even when you beat a boss and magically wake up in the temple, there's Aggro, waiting patiently, always by your side, helping you to complete your journey. And as Wander watches her fall, the last thing tying him to his previous life, the last shred of humanity he has left, goes down with his horse. And so he turns to face the last Colossus, with nothing left to care for. All that remains is his will to keep going forward. And so you start the climb. The further up you go, the darker and rainier the sky becomes. As you climb up the last pillar and reach the summit, you meet the final Colossus, trapped in stone to keep its destructive power contained. The last demon, Malice. The design of Malice is truly fitting of the final boss in your story. While most other Colossi seem to be fairly neutral or innocuous, Malice is the exact opposite. His immense size is noticeable right away as he quite literally towers over you. The camera shot at the beginning of the fight does a fantastic job at showing you the sheer scale and the challenge he presents to you. Malice is also the most humanoid of any of the Colossus, which is fitting considering you'll have to give up the last shred of your humanity to defeat him. You can feel the evil, threatening aura radiating throughout his body, amplified by the thunderstorms that surround him constantly. And right from the get-go, he's shooting fireballs at you with intent to kill. The player has no chance to face Malice head-on. The only safe way to reach him is by running through the winding paths and tunnels underground, which you can reach by diving from object to object as he hurls his fireballs at you. After Metal Gear Soliding your way through what seems like an endless barrage of explosions, you finally reach the base of the beast, and the music swings into life as you begin the long climb up to his head. The first section of his body is all rock, so it's just a long platforming stretch up to his waist. Once you climb up halfway, the final sequence begins. Stabbing at the weak point in Malice's back makes him writhe in pain, and after reaching back to swat you away, you're able to grab onto his left hand. He'll swing you back around, trying to shake you off, but you're able to climb up his arm and get to his second weak spot, his bicep. He'll wince in pain once again and grab at the cut, letting you climb onto his right hand. From there, you're able to climb to the top of his hand, where you need to find a way to get up to his head. By stabbing his hand with your sword, Malice will stop shaking for a moment, letting you shoot your bow into his final weak point, the shoulder. He'll instinctively reach for the wound, giving you access to his neck. All there is left to do is what you've done to so many Colossi before. Climb to the top of Malice's head and stick your sword into his skull one last time. The screen fades back into the riders we saw earlier, entering the Forbidden Lands from the same bridge as Wander did. They walk down to the base of the temple just as the final altar cracks into pieces. It then cuts back to her lifeless body, and we see for the first time how Wander makes it back to the temple. Dorman lifts you up and transports you back to the hole at the top. When you return for the final time, your body's been completely possessed by the shadowy figures. Your skin has turned gray, and horns have grown from your head, revealing to the player that they've been used the whole time in order to free Dorman's soul. Every Colossus you defeated shot a piece of Dorman's soul into your body, symbolized by the tendrils that consume you after each fight. The soldiers shoot you down and stab you in the heart to end your suffering. But you manage to rise for a moment, rip the sword out of your body, and stare at Mono one last time before the shadows consume you. You rise once again, but this time, Dorman takes control of you, expanding into his full form, his soul no longer segmented into 16 pieces. You then get to play as Dorman, attacking Lord Amon and his soldiers as best you can. This perspective shift is really cool, since it lets you experience what it's like to fight as a Colossus, and how sluggish and difficult it is to defeat these small peasants on the ground. Eventually, the soldiers escape up the steps, and Lord Amon casts the ancient sword into the water below, sealing Dorman away for good, and Wander alongside him. The End of the Battle soundtrack rings out once more, as you're given control of Wander for the last time, as a final punch in the gut. You desperately try to reach back towards Mono, but as much as you flail and roll and jump, it doesn't matter. There's nothing you can do. You eventually succumb to the pull of the sword and fall into the pool of water. The bridge begins to collapse as the soldiers make it to the other side, leaving the Forbidden Lands and Mono's lifeless body behind for good. The entire quest, defeating all 16 Colossi, sacrificing your life. All for nothing. Dorman warned Wander of the heavy price he would pay for saving Mono's life, but he didn't care. All that mattered was that she came back, so he sacrificed his life and Agro's to do it. Or maybe not. Agro limps back to the temple, coming back to us as he always does. Agro and Mono reunite. Agro and Mono walk towards the pool of water you disappeared into. And in your place, a small, innocent child cries, with horns protruding out of his head. Wander's been reverted back to his most innocent form. The three of you make your way up to the top of the tower, where it seems life has started to grow once more. Flowers bloom, trees grow healthy fruit. Even deer and birds roam the lands. And that's where we leave our three. Our perspective shifts, back to the eagle we started this journey with so long ago, and he flies away. The ending to Shadow of the Colossus is a fantastic and emotional conclusion to a beautifully written story. It touches on important themes and feelings like love, loss, guilt, and futility. It's a parable of grief, teaching us to deal with loss in the best way possible, by moving through it. While Wander did succeed in bringing back his girl, he failed at letting her go in the first place. And ultimately, his actions caused harm to both himself and the people around him. It's a moving lesson told through a simple journey that makes us reflect on both ourselves and the people we love and care for. The details of the story are left vague on purpose, so you can make up your own and tie in experiences from your own life to relate more to these characters. Shadow of the Colossus showed people that games were more than just entertainment. They were art. They could move you, make you laugh, make you cry, or even fill you with joy, amazement, and excitement. Shadow of the Colossus revolutionized the idea of what games could be, not only from a story perspective, but also from the amazing graphical and mechanical advancements it made as well. Its identity and impact can be seen in a number of popular games, even to this day, shaping an entire genre, all on its own. A remake of the game was made for the PS4 back in 2017, and it showed the true beauty and potential of the game, while keeping Fumito Ueda's vision for the game alive. And while the game looks absolutely amazing, I feel it loses a bit of the atmosphere that made it so special. Nothing can truly top that first ride on Agro. Your sword raised high in the air as you race through this forbidden world. And although you may not know it yet, you're about to experience a game that can only be described in one word. Masterpiece.